Interviews with Colleen presents Abraham Lincoln.
A new nation through the eyes of realism, regionalism, and naturalism. The crash of the Civil War.
Today's topic is one of America's bloodiest wars, the Civil War. Slavery was regarded as a peculiar institution that was both an economic and moral issue and left a lasting effect on the nation. The controversy over slavery intensified after the War with Mexico in the 1800s, since it once again opened the door to the question of extending slavery into the newly acquired land. The stress of the war took over the Union and war was declared.
7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent.
How about we let Mr. Lincoln talk a little more about this topic?
Well, thank you. A new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who have gave their lives that the nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hollow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little know nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here.
Whoa, Mr. Lincoln, I have a few questions for you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I go on a rant sometimes. I like to tell stories, you know.
So, how did the Civil War impact our society?
The Civil War was a violent clash not just of armies, but ideas as well that developed realism, regionalism, and naturalism.
Realism emphasized the development of a character. Regionalism tried to capture the reality of ordinary people's lives, and naturalism searched for explanations.
These literary movements can be seen as building the identity of a nation, since the Civil War left a lasting impression on the land of hope and opportunity.
So, how did history perpetuate these literary movements during our time period?
Well, how about we take a look?
The Civil War was a violent crash, not just of armies, but ideas as well, that developed realism, regionalism, and naturalism. Realism emphasized the development of a character, regionalism tried to capture the reality of ordinary people's lives, and naturalism searched for explanations. These literary movements can be seen as building the identity of the nation, since the Civil War left a lasting impression of the land of hope and opportunity.
The reaction against Romanticism caused writers to turn away from this writing for many reasons. First off, Romanticism portrayed life as an always positive occurrence, when in reality it was not. In contrast to Romanticism, realism spoke of the horrible events and informed America what was going on. The Depression was one of the worst crises in the 20th century. Realism did not hide the fact that America was at a low point. However, Romanticism always found a way to view all subjects of life in an optimistic way. Realistic writers sought to portray ordinary life as real people live it: factory workers, politicians, gunfighters, and cowboys.
Examples of realistic writers include Bret Harte and Mark Twain. Realistic writers attempted to show characters in an objective, almost factual way. They tried to find meaning in the commonplace. Mark Twain, a prominent realist writer, exemplifies different aspects of human nature through his literary works. The theme of realism is prominently shown in one of his most famous works, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which shows the questions that arose during the Civil War. This included the institution of slavery and the white Southerners in a moral perspective. The celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, also written by Mark Twain, portrays different dialects that realistically portray the personalities of the characters. Most of his works satirizes the idea of romanticism and explores the different perspectives of human nature. Twain views humans as sinful and the nature having all capability and power.
After the Civil War, the nation was recovering, and realism allowed American citizens to rise up and take advantage of many opportunities. Since realism was the type of journalism that represented the true life of Americans, the people of America relied on this grounded source. This type of writing allowed Americans to open their eyes and see what is really going on. Farmers moved to the cities for work, and immigrants took advantage of crowded tenements. The post-Civil War recovery is what allowed realism to prevail in the end. Once again, this reinforces the fact that realism painted the real picture that life portrayed.
Regionalism is often referred to as local color. Such writers use regional dialect. They use vivid descriptions of the landscape. They sought to capture the essence of life in the various regions of the nation, attempting to capture customs, dress, speech, and other local differences. Examples of regionalists include Bret Hart, Kate Chopin, and Mark Twain. In the 19th and 20th century, regionalism allowed for each of the different parts of the country to express what they see. Different parts of America might be affected by the war more than others. The West experienced the Dust Bowl because of lack of crop rotation. Farmers had to leave because the conditions were unbearable, and they sought to work in the West. They found jobs picking cotton. The pictures that they paint and journalism that they log will be totally different than that of a person living in New York during the Roaring '20s. Kate Chopin's use of regionalism is shown in many of her works, portraying the idea of feminism while showing psychologies of various characters.
The naturalists believe that one's destiny is decided by heredity and environment, physical drives, and economic circumstances. They believe that human beings had no control over events. They also believe that human beings are at the mercy of nature and its brutal forces. Examples of naturalistic writers include Jack London and Stephen Crane. Crane emphasizes the deterministic nature of human life through his naturalistic work. Crane wrote The Red Badge of Courage. Naturalism affected the life of many people. It made people feel that they were powerless and were unable to control the future outcome of their life to a certain extent. The Red Badge of Courage portrays the life of many soldiers during the Civil War, especially that of a younger generation.
Naturalist writers insisted that the extraordinary is real, too. Naturalists always believed in a presiding force that allowed a person's fate to be controlled by something other than them. At a time of realism, it was hard to think, hypothetically, and due to the lack of proof, it was blamed at nature's doing.
The Civil War has furthered the evolution of realism, regionalism, and naturalism in America, and these various movements resulted in diverse mindsets and perspectives. The intellectual war brought changes in ordinary everyday life. The truly American modes of writing have dominated most of literature since the 19th century.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Thanks for joining us. See you next time on Interviews with Colleen.